All right, so we are ready to begin. Again, welcome to today's session, Getting Started, Understanding Eligibility and Requesting Accommodations. This is part one of a three-part series that will be held today and then next Wednesday and the Wednesday after that at the same time. We will drop registration links for the session two and session three at the end of our webinar today. I want to remind you that this event is being recorded for publication on our YouTube channel, so that we ask that you keep your microphones and your cameras off for security for yourself. And to use the chat feature for any questions you might have, there will be time at the end for us to pose those questions to our DSA team. Next slide, please. I just wanted to take a moment to introduce myself. My name is Stacy Robinson. I am a career coach here with American Public University and American Military University. Again, this is a collaboration between our two departments. One of our behind the scenes support is Hannah Brumbaugh. She is our resource and student engagement coordinator here in Career Services. And now I'm going to hand it off to our DSA team to take it from here.
Thanks, Stacy. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us today. We're super excited to have the opportunity to share about our office. And so my name is Brianna Gillis. I am the Disability and Registrar Specialist. We also have Julie Komisarek, who's the Director of Disability Services and Catalog Management, and Caroline Wines, our Senior Disability and Technology Specialist. Together, our teams are working together collaboratively to support student success, engagement, and success throughout the academic journey. Today's webinar will provide an overview of DSA's role and mission in supporting equal access for students with disabilities. We'll discuss the basic eligibility requirements for academic accommodations and review some of the common disability categories that our office supports. We'll also walk through the accommodation request process, including how students can submit documentation, complete the student narrative, and prepare for the next steps after submitting a request. Our goal today is to help you better understand the resources available and make the accommodation process feel more approachable and transparent. Next slide, please. Okay, now that you've had the chance to meet our team, let's talk a little bit more about disability services and accommodations, or DSA as we are referred to as, and our role that the office plays in supporting students. The DSA team provides support, resources, and equal access for students with disabilities. Our goal is to ensure that students have equitable access to their educational experiences by helping to remove barriers that may impact their ability to fully participate in coursework and university activities. We work directly with students to identify reasonable accommodations that support access to academics while maintaining the essential requirements and integrity of each course. Accommodations are individualized, meaning we look at each student's specific disability-related needs and determine appropriate supports on a case-by-case basis. Our office also follows the Americans with Disability Act, or ADA, along with other applicable federal laws and university policies that protect students with disabilities. In addition to supporting students, we partner closely with faculty and university departments to help foster an inclusive and respectful learning environment for all learners. At the heart of what we do, our team exists to help level the playing field for students with disabilities so that they have equal access to their courses, educational opportunities, and overall academic experience. Next slide, please. One of the most important things to understand about accommodations in higher education is that eligibility works through an interactive and individualized process. There is a no one-size-fits-all approach when it comes to disability accommodations in higher education. Every student's experience, barriers, and academic needs can be different, even among students with the same diagnosis. Because of that, accommodations are not assigned automatically based on one's diagnosis. Instead, our office uh, works collaboratively with each student to better understand how their disability impacts them in an academic setting and what types of support may be appropriate and reasonable for them. Students play a very important role in this process. Since students know their experiences and challenges best, we encourage them to actively share what barriers they are facing and what strategies or accommodations they believe may be help to support their success. Of course, our team is here to guide and support students throughout every step of the process. Whether a student is applying for accommodations for the first time, updating existing accommodations, or simply exploring what support may be available, we work with them individually to help determine appropriate next steps. Next slide, please. We want to take a moment to highlight some of the disability categories commonly supported by our team. This is not an exhaustive list, but rather an overview of some of the conditions that we frequently work with. These may include students with ADHD, psychological or mental health disorders, medical conditions, visual impairments, hearing impairments, developmental disabilities, and learning disorders. We also support students experiencing short-term conditions when those conditions substantially impact academic functioning for a temporary period of time. It's important to remember that having a diagnosis alone does not automatically determine accommodations. Instead, we focus on how the condition impacts the student in an academic environment and whether accommodations are needed to provide equal access. If students ever are unsure whether their condition may qualify, we encourage them to reach out to our office so we can discuss their situation and guide them through the process. Next slide, please. All right, now let's walk through the basic three-step process students complete when requesting accommodations through DSA. The first step is submitting documentation. Students provide documentation from a qualified healthcare provider or professional that identifies their disability or condition. We will go into a little bit more detail about documentation requirements in slides to come. The second step is completing the impact statement, or sometimes referred to as the student narrative. This gives students the opportunity to describe in their own words what the barriers or challenges they experience in their courses due to their disability. This part of the process is extremely important because it helps our team better understand the student's lived experience and individual needs. This statement can come directly from the student or it can be included in documentation. And the third step is requesting accommodations. Students can identify accommodations they believe may be helpful based on the barriers that they are experiencing. This begins the interactive review process with our office. And again, this can be provided by the student or included in documentation. Once all information is received, the DSA support committee reviews the documentation and student narrative together to determine appropriate and reasonable accommodations. If additional information is needed, we'll work with you directly throughout that process to provide guidance and support. Next slide, please. Next, let's review some of the general documentation requirements that students encounter when applying for accommodations. Documentation guidelines can vary depending on the type of disability or condition being reviewed. And one of the most important factors is the age of the documentation. For learning disabilities, documentation must generally be within the last 3 years if the student is under the age of 21. If the student is over 21, documentation may still be accepted as long as the evaluation or testing was completed after the age of 18. For mental health or psychological disabilities, documentation should typically be created after the student turns 18. This helps ensure that the information accurately reflects the student's current functioning and needs in an adult academic environment. For physical disabilities or medical conditions, permanent conditions may use documentation of any age, especially when the diagnosis and functional limitations are lifelong and unlikely to change. However, for temporary conditions, such as injuries, surgeries, or short-term medical issues. Documentation generally needs to be less than 1 year old so we can understand the student's current limitations and support needs. It's also important to note that documentation should clearly identify the diagnosis. It can also include information about how the condition impacts the student academically. If students are unsure whether their documentation meets requirements, we always encourage them to submit what they have or contact our office for guidance before obtaining additional evaluations or records. Next slide, please. Now let's discuss key components that should be included in disability documentation. First, documentation should include the evaluator's credentials. This means that the documentation must come from a licensed or otherwise qualified professional who is practicing within the appropriate field related to the student's condition. This can be in the form of a letter, a VA document, or medical records. The documentation should also include a clear and specific diagnosis. Rather than listing general symptoms or concerns, the documentation should identify the diagnosed disability or medical condition and can explain how it impacts the student. For students with learning disabilities, additional testing details are typically required. This includes the names of the diagnostic assessments or evaluations that were administered, the dates that the evaluations were completed, and relevant test scores along with interpretation of the results. These details help our office understand the student's functional limitations and determine what accommodations may be appropriate and reasonable in the academic environment. If any required information is missing, our office may follow up with the student for clarification or request additional documentation. Our goal is not to create barriers, but rather to ensure we have enough information to engage in the interactive process and provide effective support. Next slide, please. So after the student submits documentation, the next step in the process is completing the impact statement, or sometimes called the student narrative. This is an important part of the accommodation process because it allows students to explain in their own words how their disability affects them both in everyday life and within the online learning environment. We encourage students to think specifically about the barriers they're experiencing in their courses. For example, they may consider challenges related to concentration, reading, writing, processing information, time management, communication, technology use, or completing assignments and exams. Sometimes students are unsure where to start, so it can be helpful to frame their thoughts using a statement like, due to blank, I'm having troubles in my classroom doing blank. This helps students connect their diagnosis or condition to the actual academic barriers that they're experiencing. The impact statement does not need to be overly formal or lengthy. What's most important is that students are honest and specific about their experiences so our office can better understand their needs and determine appropriate accommodations. It's also important to note that sometimes the impact statement is already included in a student's documentation. And in those cases, we can use the information provided by the medical professional regarding how the disability impacts the student's learning and academic functioning. However, if that information is not included in the documentations, please don't panic. You can still provide your own impact statement separately through email or by typing in a Word document and submitting it to our office. This step also helps students become active participants in the interactive process, which is a key part of determining individualized support. Next slide, please. Okay, now that we've discussed documentation and impact statement, the last step is requesting accommodations. It's important to remember that accommodations are individualized and are designed to provide equal access to learning. So the purpose of accommodations is not to give a student an advantage, but rather to reduce disability-related barriers so that students have equitable access to their educational experience. When thinking about accommodations, it can be helpful for students to reflect on the specific challenges that they're experiencing because of their disability. For example, students may ask themselves, what tasks are difficult for me because of my disability? What barriers do I experience in an online learning environment? What tools, supports, or adjustments have helped me succeed in the past? These questions can help students better identify what types of support may be beneficial in their courses. Some students may already know which accommodations have worked well for them previously, while others may still be exploring what support they need. And that is completely okay. Our office works collaboratively with students throughout this process and can guide those conversations. Ultimately, the goal is to identify reasonable accommodations that best support each student's individual needs within the online learning environment while still maintaining the essential requirements of the course. Next slide, please. Okay, so what happens after you complete the three-step process? Once a student has completed all of the steps, submitting the documentation, completing the impact statement, and requesting accommodations, our work behind the scenes begins. At that point, our Disability Support Committee conducts a thorough review of the student's file. This review is completed carefully to ensure we fully understand the student's documented condition, functional limitations, and reported experiences. The review process can take up to 10 business days, so please keep that in mind when you initiate the process. Once the review is complete, the DSA Support Committee will reach out to the students via email with the proposed accommodations or with information on what we still need for the review if it's not all provided. After receiving the proposed accommodations, the student has the opportunity to review them and confirm whether they will meet their needs. If the student agrees to the accommodation or agrees that the accommodations are appropriate, they will confirm with our office by return email. At that point, the DSA Support Committee finalizes the DSA review and move toward creating a DSA award letter that show the approved accommodations. If at any point a student feels that their needs change or they have questions about the proposed accommodations, we encourage you to reach out and so that we can continue working with you collaboratively throughout the process. Next slide, please. Once a student's accommodations have been approved and their review has been finalized, they officially become registered with our office. At that point, the Disability Services and Accommodation Office will provide the students with a DSA award letter. And this letter serves as the official record of the student's approved accommodations and includes important information such as the student's name, student ID number, and the date that the letter was issued. And it'll list the approved accommodations the student is eligible to receive. If a student is receiving temporary accommodations, the date that the accommodations expire will also be listed on the letter. It is the student's responsibility to provide their instructors with a copy of the DSA award letter so accommodations can be implemented within the course. However, if a student experiences any difficulty with this, please don't ever hesitate to reach out to our team, and we will be happy to help facilitate sharing your DSA award letter with your current instructors. It's important to note that instructors are only responsible for applying accommodations that are officially approved and listed within the student's award letter. This helps ensure consistency, accuracy, and appropriate implementation of accommodations across courses. If a student encounters an instance where their accommodations are not being followed, we ask that they reach out to our team right away, and we will help facilitate a conversation with the instructor of that course to be sure that the student's accommodations are understood and applied. Our office remains available as a resource to both students and faculty if questions arise regarding accommodations or implementation of those accommodations. You should also know that a student's DSA award letter generally remains valid for as long as they are actively enrolled as a student at APU or AMU. In most cases, students don't need to reapply for accommodations every session or submit new documentation repeatedly once they have been approved. Typically, a new award letter would only need to be issued if the student requires additional accommodations, experiences a change in their disability-related needs, or takes an extended break from their studies and later returns to the university. In those situations, our office may review updated information to ensure that the student's accommodations still appropriately reflect their current needs and academic environment. Next slide, please. As we wrap up today's webinar, we'd like to thank everyone for taking the time to join us and learn more about disability services and accommodations. We also want to invite you to join us next Wednesday from 11:30 to 12 as we continue discussing how our team supports students throughout their academic journey and helps connect them with resources for success. If you have not registered for this event, Stacy will drop the link for the registration in the chat. And if you have any questions after today's session, or if you are interested in getting registered with our office, please don't hesitate to reach out to our team. You can contact us by email directly at dsa@apus.edu or by phone directly at 304-885-5252. We are always happy to answer questions, provide guidance, and help students navigate the accommodation process. Thank you again for being here today, and we look forward to connecting with you again soon.
We are opening the floor to any questions you might have. Just feel free to drop them in the chat. Our team will be here to answer those questions for you as long as you need. As you're thinking of those questions, I do want to let you know that once you disconnect today, there will be a feedback survey that will pop up shortly after you disconnect. We would really appreciate if you would take about the 90 seconds it takes to fill that out. That does help our teams produce new content that is helpful for our students and alumni and give us feedback on what was presented to you today. All right, so if you don't have any questions today, we want to thank you again for attending. We hope that we will see you the next 2 Wednesdays. And if you think of any questions later, please don't hesitate to reach out to the DSA team. Thank you so much and have a great rest of your day.